tuning in. I'm your host, Aaron Diaz, and you're listening to episode number 4 of Live the Good Life from the podcast studios of Aaron's Wine Chronicles corporate headquarters in the heart of Washington wine country. Today, I'm joined by my co-host and brother, Adam.
Woo! I'm not worthy, but I'm here, so I'll take it. Today, the topic's going to be a side-by-side tasting of 2 delicious but different Washington State Cab Sauvignon wines paired with some fresh hors d'oeuvres. And here's how we're going to do this. So we'll talk a little bit about the hors d'oeuvres first. That's your opportunity, Aaron. You'll jump in on that, and we'll share the recipes and the prep for making them and any tips.
That sounds good. After we do that, after we talk about the hors d'oeuvres, the appetizers, we're going to talk about the 2 wines that we're actually drinking today and providing you some information on. We're going to dive into some of the details of each of the wines. We'll talk about who the winemaker is. We'll mention that the winery and tasting room where it's located, and if I visited it or if Adam has visited it, we'll talk about that. Then we'll talk about where the grapes came from in terms of what's called an AVA, which is an American viticultural area. These are areas that have been designated based on their specific geographic location and climate-based attributes or characteristics. And these characteristics typically will distinguish the grapes that come from that area from surrounding regions. And there are currently, I believe, if I'm not a little bit late on this, I think there are 19 current American viticultural areas in the state of Washington. Now, new ones are popping up periodically, so there may be 20, but I think right now, as we're recording this, there's 19. We'll also share with you the specific vineyard or vineyards where these wines came from. We'll talk about the vintage, which is actually the year that the grapes were harvested, and then some information about how those grapes were aged before they were bottled. And then we'll give you some other specifications like the alcohol content by volume, whether or not it was capped with a cork or a screw cap, how long we decanted it, the price that we paid for it, and then where you might purchase these wines if you're interested in trying to get them.
Yeah, and then we'll go through the wine tasting process. And remember, we covered it in episode 2, and we'll revisit that process. And so for each wine, and we'll describe our personal thoughts for them. We're going to want to, see, observe in the glass, the color, the intensity, the clarity, the hue, the rim, the color, all that stuff. I mean, the rim color, rather. And, you're going to swirl it around. You're going to look at the legs, tears, sediment, etc. You're going to smell it. Describe your thoughts on the smell, the aroma. Then you're going to move to tasting it. Discuss what we experience. Before enjoying the hors d'oeuvres with the wine, we'll describe the wine's finish, the mouthfeel. And finally, we will bring in the appetizers and describe the pairing.
Yeah, it's the fucking Catalina wine mixer, baby!
Catalina wine mixer. Yeah.
Okay, so we will start with the appetizers that we prepared for this tasting. We have 2 appetizers today that we're loading up here, and we have tons of them between Adam and I and my other brother Jason. Over the next year or 2, we'll be popping out a couple of different appetizers periodically and giving you the recipes and talking about how to prepare them. These 2 that we've got today that we're pairing with these 2 Cabernets are relatively simple and quick to make. They're inexpensive and they go over really well. I will say that this first one, the loaded Ritz cracker, is something that I had never had in any party or gathering that I've ever been to until I had it at some friends' homes here in the Tri-Cities years ago. And I stole this from her, a good friend of mine. Anyway, the ingredients for this, it's called a loaded Ritz cracker. It's you have to buy original Philadelphia whipped cream cheese, a regular size container. You get 3 to 4 slices of some thick, high-end deli ham. Now, this can be honey or Black Forest ham, and typically I ask the person at the deli to slice this between like 1/8 of an inch and 3/16 of an inch thick. For this appetizer, I went with 3/16 of an inch. And then you need a bottle of Dietz and Watson zesty honey mustard, and then you need some original Ritz crackers. And so the way we make these appetizers is you basically dice up the ham into small cubes. So if you got 3/16 of an inch, slices, you can basically make little cubes, dicing these things up. Take your time and be precise so that you have nice small cubes of ham. And I typically use about a 1.5 to 2-to-1 ratio of whipped cream cheese to chopped ham in a bowl, and I mix it thoroughly. Then I'll take about 20 or 30 Ritz crackers and place them out on a serving tray and apply a small dollop, about the size of a dime or a nickel, of this sweet honey mustard in the center of each cracker. And then after that, I place about a half a teaspoon of the ham cheese mix on top of each cracker. And it kind of looks like a mini scoop of ice cream on top of each cracker. And I like to make them fresh because, just a few minutes before eating, because, if they sit out too long, the honey mustard sits on the cracker for an hour or two, and then you have people over, the cracker will start to get mushy. You don't want that. Also, I guess as a last tip on this hors d'oeuvre, you don't overdo the honey mustard. It can overwhelm. This zesty honey mustard, whether it's the Dietz and Watson or you get the Boar's Head or whatever that is, they have some great, sweet, zesty, tangy honey mustards, but they can overwhelm the combined flavors very easily. So be very careful how much you put on. So we made a small amount of those just before we started recording. And then we also made a second appetizer. Now, this is something that a lot of people have had, tomatoes caprese. And what I like to do is the ingredients for this one, you get 12 to 16 small Campari tomatoes. And then, of course, you have to buy some fresh mozzarella cheese, all right? And then a container of fresh basil leaves. You'll need some olive oil, fresh ground pepper, and a small bottle of balsamic glaze. And here's how you do it. You take these little tomatoes. I typically like to slice them about 3/16 of an inch thick. I know that kind of sounds detailed, but if you get too thin, you don't have enough tomato. If you get too thick, it's just too much and it overwhelms the bite. So if you get 12 to 16 little mini tomatoes, and you can get about two good slices out of each one of these, then you'll have between 24 and 32 individual servings for this. And again, these tomatoes are cheap. Everything in this recipe list is cheap.
Man, that tastes good.
Yeah. So you wash the basil leaves, dry them, and then tear small little portions of the basil leaf and dry them out. Let them sit on a paper towel about a ½ inch by a ½ inch or so. I'm just estimating.
Yeah, you don't overdo the basil on it.
Yeah, because that's a powerful herb, and it can overpower things too.
Put like a little piece of it on.
Right. And you set those aside, okay? And then what you want to do is on a large serving tray or a plate, you pour a light, thin layer of olive oil onto the dish, and you brush it over the entire serving plate. Okay, and then you make sure there are no dry patches on the tray, and then you slice up your mozzarella into, again, about 3/16 of an inch to maybe a 1/4 of an inch thick, into like small little circles or ovals. Now, you can buy mozzarella out there that's pre-sliced, and that's kind of what I like to do. You put these slices on the olive oil glazed plate, and then you sprinkle some fresh ground pepper. Now, if you're paying attention, you notice I've been using the word fresh quite a bit, because both of these hors d'oeuvres that we're talking about need to be made fresh. 15 to 20 minutes before your guests come over, that's when you want to put them together. And then you throw them in the fridge for 5 or 10 minutes before they walk in the door, and they're perfect. So back to this one, to the tomatoes caprese. You place a single slice of tomato on each single slice of mozzarella after the mozzarella slices have been placed out on this olive oil glazed serving tray. And next, you place a single piece of basil that you've torn from the larger leaves onto the center of each tomato. Very simple. So, you're just basically making layers here. You've got the basil on top of the tomato, on top of the fresh ground pepper, on top of the mozzarella that's on top of the glazed olive oil plate. Finally, you apply this balsamic glaze in a decorative crisscross pattern over the top of the entire serving tray. Make sure that you're able to lay a bead of glaze over each one of the tomatoes. Don't miss one. And don't overdo the glaze. It's really easy to do that, but these balsamic glazes are very sweet and tangy, and they can, again, dominate. They can overwhelm the balance of this hors d'oeuvre if too much is used. So, again, make these things fresh And I swear, these two are like heaven in your mouth when you're drinking the wines. Adam's been,
they're great. Yeah.
enjoying these right now as I've been talking.
Yeah, if you hear some eating going on, that's probably me while I'm trying to chug it down with some wine. But yeah.
So now we're going to talk about the two Cabernets that we've got. And I'm going to show you a quick picture of the two bottles. For those of you who are watching the video podcast, you'll be able to see the actual bottles. But wine number one is from Gramercy Cellars, and this is a 2016 Cabernet Sauvignon. Wine number two is from Winescape Winery in Spokane.
And the first one's from Walla Walla.
Yes, right. Yeah. Gramercy Cellars is in Walla Walla. And the second one is, of course, from Spokane. But it's made with grapes from Red Mountain. And we'll talk about the details of that shortly. So what we're going to do is with wine number one, we'll talk about this guy first. The winemaker is Greg Harrington. He's both the owner and the winemaker of Gramercy Cellars. Again, it's located in Walla Walla, Washington, and I have visited Gramercy a few times. Adam, have you visited Gramercy?
I have not.
I don't think you have.
But I'm sure you've met Greg. Have you met Greg?
I actually did not meet Greg.
Oh, wow.
The few times I've been there.
One of the few people you haven't met in the wine
business. Sometimes you get lucky, and the winemaker's there. Oftentimes they've got tasting room staff who are managing the winery. But Greg, I have not met. I will make it a point to meet him the next time I go.
Yeah.
So this one comes from Walla Walla. And it comes from an AVA, which is the Columbia Valley AVA, which is the big bully on the block in Washington State. Columbia Valley AVA takes up more space than most eastern states.
Wow.
And the three vineyards that they get their Cabernet Sauvignon grapes from, actually, they also might get their Merlot and Petit Verdot, because it's actually not 100% Cab, is the Finney Hill Vineyard, which is in the Hors Hills. Gramercy Estate Vineyards, which is in South Side Walla Walla, and Sagemore Vineyards, which is White Bluffs AVA. And the vintage is 2016. Now, when we talk about vintage, a lot of people may not understand, but when you see a bottle that's a 2022 or a 2010 or whatever the case is, that is the year the grapes were harvested, right? Now, from harvest, typically it takes a couple of years for the grapes to go through the process of aging, fermentation and aging and all of those things that happen before they actually bottle it. So typically, a 2016 bottle isn't actually bottled until 2018, and then it's rolled out either in 2018 or 2019, or sometimes wineries will hold on to these wines for another year or two, and they'll roll them out 3 or 4 years from when the grapes were actually harvested. So that gives you a little idea of what the year means on the bottle. For this wine, it's 92% Cabernet, 7% Merlot, and 1% Petit Verdot. And with regard to the barrel aging program, it spent 22 months 30% of the grapes spent 22 months in new French oak, 70% in 2 to 5 year old French oak. And then they blended them together and they ended up with the Cabernet Sauvignon. Now, in Washington State, if you have 75% Cabernet Sauvignon, you can call it a cab. You don't have to call it a blend.
Yeah.
See, that's the cutoff, right? So if you have under 75%, then you have to distinguish it as a blend, a red blend of some sort, right? So this wine comes in at 14.1%. It's got a cork for the top. We decanted it. Adam and I decanted it for about an hour.
2016. Right?
Yep, 2016. And then Adam came over before we started recording. My brother joined me here at the house, corporate headquarters.
Yeah.
And we
Very
went to
common. I drop in a lot. Get to taste some fine wines.
And so we ended up doing our evaluation before we started recording because we wanted to take our time, go through the process of looking at it and swirling it and smelling it and tasting it and then taking some notes down and repeating that process. So we took about 45 minutes or so with both of these wines and we took some notes down and now we're recording this podcast. The price for this wine was about $50 at the winery when I purchased it. And now I'm not sure. I think it might be sold out. But the winery or an online wine distributor may carry it because oftentimes online wine distributors will purchase wines in bulk. And if they don't sell out, they'll keep them and people can buy them years later after they've been introduced into the market. So while this may be sold out, you might be able to get it at the winery if they've libraried some of these or online. So the next thing we're going to talk about is this one wine right here, the one from Gramercy. Adam and I took some notes. And you know, if you've been following us, you know, we took you through the wine tasting process where, you know, you do some visual observations and you swirl it and you look at the color and so forth. And then you smell it. You try to get some information about the aromas. Then you taste it. And then you analyze that and you try to get some information about whether or not it's layered or complex and what the finish is like and what the mouthfeel is like. And then you can make a rating. And we've got these two side-by-side wines. So that's what we've done. Adam and I have both independently done this. So when Adam came over today, I had already done my tasting, and I pretty much had my notes already finished, and I didn't bias him.
Yeah, the pressure was on, man. I just kind of came in blind and kind of hit it. I was surprised at some of the results. But we kind of agreed on several.
I would say probably 80 to 90% of the attributes for both of these wines, we kind of hit the same characteristics, the same notes on these. So, Adam, I'll let you take this and let's go through your notes on this wine. This is the Gramercy Cellars Cab.
Yeah. So when I was looking at the visual, you know, the color, the rim variation, the clarity, the intensity, what have you. Yeah, I saw deep ruby color, light rim color, and that was pretty much it. And I think in your notes, they were pretty much the same. You were spot on with it too. You said deep ruby color, clear separation of the rim color, clear in color. So you know, it was kind of funny how that was pretty base. That was pretty easy. Mm-hmm. As we moved into the swirl, observed the legs. You know, if there was sediment or what have you, kind of swirled it. Good legs on it, moderately substantial. That's kind of how I like my wines. Sometimes there's been some good heavier legs that I delve into. You described it as moderate amount, size of tears, legs, no sediment. Both similar.
And typically, when I look at that attribute, I'm trying to understand what the alcohol is. You know, is it higher alcohol or lower? And then also, I'm also trying to look at the viscosity of it. You know what I'm saying? I mean, real thick. You know, you get these dessert wines, Adam, that we have when we're smoking cigars, and you swirl them, and it takes forever for those tears because it's a heavy-bodied, syrupy,
or like
sugary.
Some of the Pinots that are just real light.
Those are very light.
You know,
boom.
And you kind of see, really see the difference there. On smells, I described it as a wonderful aroma, real ripe grapes I got off it, just right off the get-go. I know that's pretty cliche maybe.
No, but actually you got I really smell of grape.
Ripe grape off it. I was like, these are just like some ripe grapes I'm really getting off it. And what did you say? You said aromas of honey and ripe cherries. Well, good. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Now, again, like we talked about back in episode, 2? You know, nobody's right or wrong here. This is exactly the way Adam interpreted this wine based on his palate, on his nose, and the way I interpreted it with mine. So it's not right or wrong. It's just how we're perceiving the flavors and the smells.
Yeah. And you know, and then when we got into the taste of it, I think we were both, I got tart red fruit that softly fades on the palate. Sometimes you'll drink that wine and it's tart and it just lingers. It's just tart and it's just strong tartness that lingers on the roof of your mouth for, in my opinion, sometimes too long.
A little bit of acidity there to it.
I didn't get that with here. It's softly faded, and that's kind of how I felt about that.
And mine was almost identical to that in some respects because I also got a tart red fruit on it and spice. I got some spice. It wasn't. At first, I thought it might be the alcohol, but it wasn't. It was more of kind of like a little bit of a pepper, white pepper or something that was on the actual palate. And, you know, I thought that, you know, the flavors didn't really change or morph as they went from the front of my tongue to the back of the finish. It was kind of more uniform across my palate.
Yeah. And so moving on to the complexity and the layering of flavors, I didn't see it. To me, it didn't seem very complex. It was pretty simplistic. There wasn't a variety of flavors going on simultaneously. It was very uniform.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
That's a good way to put it. And that actually goes with what I was saying up there on the tastes. And it's like, once you get hit with what you get hit with, that's what you've got.
Yeah.
And it doesn't morph or change. It kind of like, you're right, that kind of sticks with it. Yep.
Yeah. And I know in your notes you noted some acidity and astringency. What the fuck does that mean?
Well, astringency is
Explain, Professor from Gilligan's Island, in my terms where I can understand.
I like that. Keep it up, and I'm going to tell Mom, and you'll be grounded. Astringency to me is when the wine actually sucks the moisture out of your mouth.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And you
Definitely
feel like,
not
you know
that.
what? You feel like a wraith taking away a level.
Yeah.
That's just between you and me, but you know what I'm saying.
But you were like some acidity and astringency, so you did get some of that. That's funny. I did not get that. But you spoke that in your notes that sweet fruit lingers, not as complex or layered as the winescape wine, which
is coming up.
Yeah, coming up. Yeah, and the finish and mouthfeel, I said a little acidity that fades on the finish, medium body and feel. So when I said that, I did that. I described that on my finish. You were on top of that in your description of the complexity. So kind of, yeah. I mean, I did get some of that, but not much. Very, very minimal.
Yep.
But yeah.
So now, at the very end of this, we each rated this wine relative to our experiences and other wines.
Out of 1 to 5, right?
On a 1 to 5 star scale, and you can have increments of like 0.25. So you could go.
Well, yeah, because I screwed it up. You wanted 1 to 5.
No.
Oh, I started throwing in.
No, it's okay.
Okay.
That's the way I do it. You can do like every quarter of a star, right?
Yeah. So I gave it a 3.75, and you know, and I'm liking even over 3 plus wines. You know, they're good wines. But I gave it a 3.75. Might have been a little high, but I enjoyed it.
Yep. And mine came in at 3 stars. So there was a little bit of a deviation there between the two of us, but you know, that's just based on experience. I mean, I've had a ton of different wines all over the place, and Adam has had a lot of wines, but I don't think he's tasted as many wines as I have. So his experience with wines is a little bit less than mine, and so I would think that it's a little bit lower in rating, but we did come almost spot on when you look at those characteristics.
Yeah.
So Cabernet number 2. Let's go through the winescape wine. I'll take this first part, and then we'll go have Adam take over after we're done with this. So here's a little bit of history of this. So this comes from Winescape Winery up in Spokane. And I didn't know about this winery until around 2019, the summer of 2019. My wife and I decided to go up to Spokane and do a little tasting, and we hit Winescape. We were able to meet Phil Butterfield, the owner and winemaker. He's like a microbiologist scientist during the day, and he makes wines at night. And he was a really interesting, very congenial guy. And we went through a whole bunch of different wines. But this wine, Winescape Cabernet Sauvignon 2016 was sourced from Red Mountain AVA, which is out here in Benton City. And we spend a lot of time, Adam and I and our family spend a lot of time on Red Mountain. So we know the grapes that come from that AVA probably better than most. I did take notes, but I didn't actually take notes as to which actual vineyards from Red Mountain. I suspect it might be Heart of the Hill. But the spec sheet, I did not have the spec sheet on this. This was 100% Cabernet Sauvignon, unlike the Gramercy one that we just talked about, which had 7% Merlot and 1% Petit Verdot. This is 100% Cab. Okay, and again, it comes from Red Mountain. Now, Red Mountain is renowned for its more tannic wines, you know, big-bodied, pow, right in your face, right? So for the barrel aging, it was aged for around 22 months, where about 2/3 of the grapes were in new French oak, and about 1/3 were in used French oak, maybe 1 to 2 year old French oak, and then they were put together at the end there. So the alcohol by volume is 15.9%. Now that's high for a typical wine. It's on the higher end. The other one was 14.1%. Okay, so this is almost 2% by volume higher. And that does make a difference. And so this one is corked We also decanted this for the same amount of time, about 1 hour before we did our tasting.
And it was cheaper.
It was. The QPR on this is out of this world, Adam. $38.
That's a great price.
Now
for
that's
a good
the
wine.
retail price, Adam. I was, considered industry. He gave me a 30% discount on a case, and I bought a case, and I actually bought the very last case that he had back in 2019 of August.
And did you send me some to my house?
I did. You did. You
Okay.
had 1 or 2 bottles that I gave you from that case, and we've actually brought it over once or twice.
I think we hit that.
Yeah.
We may have hit that.
And so anyway, I will say that with regard to purchasing it, the wine is sold out at the winery at least.
Yeah.
It may still be available online at some wine distributor that may have a few bottles on hand, but it's definitely worth a look-see.
So let's get into our comparisons.
Yeah.
So right off the get-go, with the color and the observations, a deep purple. I noticed some clearness on the rim, which you were on it too. Deep purple maroon. You started to see some lighter color variation on the rim. Of course, no sediment. Prominent legs on it is how I described it. Yours was more tears with thicker dimensions than wine number 1. No sediment on this.
You know what that told me? When I looked at the legs and tiers of both wines, I was able to see the difference, and that's attributed to the alcohol content. The higher alcohol content
I see. Yeah,
had
that
more
makes sense.
substantial
That makes sense.
legs and tiers.
Yeah.
And now the thing is, it's not a real science because there's a lot of other factors that play into that. But when you have a difference of almost 2%, you can see the difference.
Okay.
Actually, if you were to put a dessert wine, Adam, that has like 20% alcohol next to one of these, and you swirl it and you look at the legs, you see a huge difference.
Huge.
Now, when you're trying to do a cab that's 14.1 versus 14.5, you can't tell the difference. That's not. I just don't think you can do that. You don't have that ability to discriminate. But
so as we got into the smell and the primary subtle aromas, this was pretty spot on. I mean, you described red fruit, raspberry, and subtle leather on the nose. And that was funny because I was on it, and I was like leathery with some mild spice, black fruit on the nose.
Yep.
So that was kind of funny. And then we got into the taste, with, on the palate, and you were pronounced sweet, ripe plum and blackberry. My flavors, I went with the black fruit plum that lingers on the palate.
And this was done independently.
Yeah.
We did not confer until after. When I was typing this into our little notes here, it was amazing how spot on we were.
And there was definitely some layering to this. So when you got into the complexity of this wine, there was some layering of flavors in it. And you described it that this is a layered wine, opulent, again, big words, I love it. Opulent with smooth tannins.
And when I use that word opulent, Adam, it to me it's like
what'd you call me?
Having more fruit than tannins.
I hear you.
And so I got when you have that fruit and the tannic component, if you have more fruit than the tannic component, then it's more of an opulent wine, and that's to me what it was.
I got it.
Because I really liked it.
And I described it as layers of dark fruit and some dry fig or prune. Mm-hmm. And when I gave you that description, I wanted to clarify that I did not get dryness with this wine, but if you've had a dry fig or dry prune,
different terms,
you'll
different
know
context.
that taste. And that was that kind of, as we slide into the mouthfeel and the finish, we both agreed that it was full-bodied. You said wine is full-bodied, elegant, has a velvety, lingering finish. I said slightly more full-bodied than number 1. And it was smooth, flavorful, and pleasurable. And,
sounds like my wife describing me.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll get her. But overall rating was, I was 4.25, and you were 4.5. And
right.
So it was funny how in the first wine I gave it you were 3 and I think I was 3.75.
Yeah, you were a little higher.
This one you were a little higher at 4.5 and I was 4.25.
But that's a lot closer. Yeah. That's a lot closer than the first one.
It is. And as I start getting up real close to the number 5, I mean, I want to be picky, man. Right. I want to really kind of
make it's going to be a 5, it's going to be something that really knocks you out.
And again, it's kind of abstract in the sense that how it appeals to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because, something that I might pick being a 4.25 might be a 3 to someone else.
Oh, exactly. That's what I'm saying.
So,
nobody's right or wrong, right?
But the nice thing is that as we progress in these podcasts, rather, people are going to kind of get a feel for what our tastes are like. And heck, if you identify with what we're saying and what we're doing, or you have your own different little spew on it, it gives you kind of a different perspective where you're at with our ranking system. But like I said, even anything, when I start getting into a 3 or 3 plus,
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah.
So.
And, the thing is, there's so many wines out there. And here's the deal. It's not a target that is immobile. This is a moving target because the wines change with age, right? You can taste a wine, go to the winery, taste the wine. 5 years later, when it's been sitting in your cellar for a while and you open it up and you let it breathe properly and everything else, it can evolve into something that really, really is different than what you originally experienced. That's the thing. It's a moving target. That's what's fun about it.
Great appetizer, brother.
Yeah, so thank you. So, we've been eating these appetizers throughout our podcast, and I want to get your thoughts on the hors d'oeuvres themselves and how you thought they paired with the wines, because I think you had when we talked about this just before recording, I think you had an interesting take.
When I started, I gave my rankings to the wine, but with one wine, what's the G again?
Gramercy, the Gramercy Cab.
Gramercy. The one that Mark G. I actually, even though I ranked it lower than the other one, I thought it paired better with the hors d'oeuvres.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. I mean, as I was eating, once I went to food with it, I was like, oh, this is nice. This really pairs with these hors d'oeuvres, these appetizers.
And some wines are really good sipping wines, and then when you add food to them, they do tend to take a step back, and vice versa, just like you're saying.
Yeah, some are good standalone, open up and drink. The drinkability on them is you're sitting down, you crank it open, you drink it, but then once you start talking about throwing food in and pairing them with food, it might kind of change the dynamics or in your mind,
And depending on the foods.
Yeah.
It could be a good thing or a bad thing, right? Because some foods don't pair well with some wines. And,
Yeah, exactly.
So my thoughts are that, the loaded Ritz appetizer, like I said, it's something that you don't see very often. Like, I have been to a ton of parties in my life.
I love it.
And I really like this. I like I said, I stole the recipe from a friend. But for me, it's that combination of the buttery cracker. Ritz cracker's kind of buttery anyway. And you've got that savory, sweet honey ham. And then you've got the light creaminess of the whipped cream cheese and the zest of that sweet honey mustard. And that together combined, if it's done in the right, levels, it really does pair pretty well with these wines.
And it's pretty easy to put together, man.
It was.
And
it was easy.
When you think about it, if you're going to be hosting, it's nice to have it easy. Because
it's easy and quick, and once you've made up everything and you have that bowl full of the chopped ham and the cream cheese, you can put them together. You can put tray after tray together in really real quick time.
So we're getting close to wrapping up, and
But I wanted to say something about the caprese.
Yeah,
the caprese hors d'oeuvres. I like that. I used that word fresh when I was talking about the recipes.
Yeah,
you get that fresh cheese, and then that sweet, tangy glaze that balances it. Then you get that herbal note of the basil, and it really works well together. But it's got to be served fresh. If it's been sitting out for an hour and a half or so, it's not going to taste as good.
And it's like the cheese is the cracker.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, you could try some stuff and put it on something, but the cheese itself is actually like the little cracker. You pick it up. So a lot of times people are grabbing a fork or something like that. But so moving right along, homework assignment. Trying to encourage people to go online and study up on wine and food pairings. Try to find a recipe or a delicious appetizer that would pair well with one of your favorite wines. Experiment with it. Kind of make mental notes and how your palate, the tasting, and how it blends. Generally speaking, for most red wines, you'll find you can't go wrong with cured meats, red meats, starches, hard cheeses, nuts, chocolate. With white wines, you'll find, what like meats, white meats, like maybe like chicken, pork,
Fish, yeah.
yep, fish, starches, soft cheeses, shellfish,
Yeah.
and
Prawns, that
work,
kind of
work
stuff.
well as pairings.
Yeah, I'm with Adam on this. If you take the time to go out and do some experimentation, the next time you have a party, you'll be the talk of the town. It's happened with both of us. We didn't actually go out and think that we were going to do the things that we've done, and as we've experimented like this and had wine parties here at the house, we get a lot of accolades from people all over the place, and it's just kind of rewarding. So we hope that this episode has helped you feel a little bit more confident with you relying on your own judgment and perceptions when it comes to tasting and appreciating wines. We also hope that you enjoyed our take on some simple, delicious, and quick appetizers for your next wine party. Thank you for joining us, and that's all we have for today's episode. Again, for more of Living the Good Life, you can find us on Instagram and Facebook at Aaron's Wine Chronicles or online at aaronswinechronicles.com. And for the video podcast of this episode, visit my YouTube channel at the @ Aaron's Wine Chronicles 6666. Our next episode is going to be where I interview Daniel Martinez. He is the owner and proprietor of Cigar Savvy in Kennewick, Washington. We will be talking about all things cigars, pipes, and tobacco.
Oh,
Adam,
yeah.
you got any last thoughts on that?
I love Daniel, and he's really knowledgeable. And if you give him an idea of what it is you like in a cigar, he'll steer you to some good choices when you go in there and see him. And he came up from the valley there, I know, in the Yakima area and stuff, and so we kind of hit it off right away when he first opened up shop here at Cigar Savvy. And I'll be excited. I might be hanging around outside the studio waiting to have a smoke with him when he gets done.
That'd be great.
Yeah, that sounds good.
All right. Well, thank you all for listening. And remember, wherever you go, whenever you can, always live the good life. Until next time.